Today, I want to talk about the way that when federal protections break down, state legislators have a unique opportunity to form a resistance to authoritarian regimes. And they're very effective at this because states are their own form of sovereignty. And that kind of an interaction with the federal government has always been a bit fraught. Okay, there's many presidents that have had very successful cooperative relationships with states, or at least that's how it appeared. But at this point, we're going to watch a scenario where the states have very, very legitimately differing aims and goals than what I would call the bad faith presidency of the Trump administration. The executive administration that we have today is not exactly staffed with experts. It's mostly staffed with people that are loyalists and often don't have a great deal of experience in the domain that they're managing. We are watching that group differ from what the states need, which is generally competent advice, competent management, competent direction, and awareness of the way that value and risk and benefits are flowing in their states, what's happening to their constituents, how they're going to work on it. That's something that they're closer to. They often remain more of a good faith performer in this regard. But what I want to talk about today is that where there is this opportunity to push back on an authoritarian uprising, state legislators are invaluable. Let's talk about how, but also how we are part of that puzzle. So a little bit of background first. States already have powerful tools for responding to federal attacks and assaults on their civil rights or public welfare. And these tools were the subject of a recent collaboration between the Women's National Law Center and StateFutures.org. There was a lot of good detail about the types of tools that state legislators might use in their arsenal to address these kinds of federal overreaches. And those tools included things in the category of strategic communication, investigatory and oversight techniques, legislation, actually, they make law, and then litigation. I think a lot of discussions on this topic, they'll give a pretty good summation of categories of tools like that, but then often don't really give clarity about what does that look like in practice in a modern world. But this document did. So that article, which is a white paper, can be found linked in my description, but it's a good read. And today I want to talk about a complement to that, which would be that as much as those legislators have these tools at their disposal and can operate effectively against authoritarianism, they also can do so much better when the public is coming along. And that's what I want to talk about here. The public has a crucial role in this regard, a crucial role to engage, not just because the Constitution expects an engaged public, but also because when we help our representatives, we don't just show up and protest. We also prepare the kind of information our representatives need. We translate that to our communities who are not following or don't understand. We document the stories of our communities and how they feel that impact. And we show up to be we signal presence, we signal scale, we signal pressure on behalf of our legislator when they need to demonstrate that the public is coming with them. So that's what I want to talk about today. The first thing that we can do as the public when we are trying to support our legislators in their fight against authoritarianism is engage a local conversation, or lack thereof. Around you, they may not be talking about the hot stuff. They may not be aware. They may not understand exactly what some of those words mean. Gerrymandering doesn't sound as bad as election fraud, but it's election fraud. So making sure that people understand what we're talking about is a big deal. For this, it's important that we share and translate legislative updates. We should do this through community channels. We should just do this directly with our neighbors. We need to find a way. We should repost reels, we should repost quotes, speeches. We should be adding our own context to them if we think it will help our neighbors understand what's happening. In addition to that, we should always be creating these artifacts. So I don't mean take attendance, and I don't mean know by naming names who in the community is concerned. I mean get the stories. We really want the artifacts because they become the evidence. They really help push that conversation forward and make that persuasion campaign in front of Congress. So we should always create artifacts. We should make sure they're getting created. We should make sure they're being held. And we should also ensure that we're publicizing and celebrating the fact that these artifacts come together, that they go to the legislator, that they're used as a persuasion campaign. When we celebrate it, when we publicize it, that has huge political capital. A celebration draws attention in a positive way. It also sets the sort of soft statement that without this, we would potentially be criticizing it. And you can see we have the energy to be public because we're celebrating. So there's a lot of complicated, in my opinion, very useful messaging in celebration. Publicize and celebrate your interactions with your legislator. Publicize and celebrate your legislator where they do good. Make sure that it's desirable for them to keep coming back to that community, getting the press, getting the visibility, getting access to that community. That is much more about the really core mission of a lot of these legislators. It's what should have been their mission. It's what I think the Constitution was expecting, being involved and representative of their people. But we don't always get it. Finally, in the strategic communication area, we need to remember we have got to debunk misinformation. And that's one of the things that people like me, people like you, we can do this for our communities. Some people are not going to pay attention. They're only going to hear the misinformation. But if you're ahead of that, if you're telling them that something is coming, and so here's the things you should know about it ahead of time, they'll be far more suspicious when they see a misinformation campaign because they've already heard a story that made sense, and it's from somebody they can find and talk to. So have your sources, have your formal demonstration of that if you need, but you can pre-bunk information by making sure that you've liaised with your legislator, find out where it's going to come from, talk with your community, make sure that they know they can talk with you. All right, now I'm one of these people. I love being this for my community. I talk with a lot of people, and that's something that if you can do it, it's great. It's rewarding, it's fulfilling, it's a good idea, it's fun. But also, if you're not somebody who's going to go talk with all your neighbors, there's still plenty that you can be doing here. So, in my opinion, participate as much as you can, but also make sure that there is evidence. Make sure there are artifacts. You want the stories, you want the volume of the impact to be known. This is where you can really shine. One more note on communication is that your diction matters. Many of you have probably been to a writing class, if not in school or in college or somewhere, but diction matters. When you align your word choice and your phrasing with the talking points of your legislator or with the parlance of your neighbors and your community, you indicate different levels of alignment. It's worth keeping in mind that some of those are more important than others. If you can draw several of them together, and it's people that you want to be harmonious, then that's a good idea. So if I can put things into the neighbor's language, which, I mean, my neighbors and my politicians speak very similarly, but if they didn't, I would try to align those talking points and my neighbor's way of thinking about it along with the priorities of the neighborhood so that it seemed far more harmonious together as a presentation. That way, people looking at this understand, oh, okay, that's the community's view, and it's very aligned with that, their representative. That's a good thing. It shows pressure, it shows scale, it shows presence. These three things are going to keep coming up. So let's move on now and talk about one of the next major tools that a legislator has at their disposal, which is this idea of investigatory and oversight practices. Legislators can compel hearings, they can conduct investigations, and this is extremely important because they need that kind of information. They need the persuasion campaign that this information could support. They also need to just know what's going on because they want to legislate wisely. So how can we help a legislator prove that federal policies are as harmful as they believe? Because that's really what the oversight and the investigatory elements often will turn into at the public level. And this is where you should submit your stories. You should submit your community stories to your legislator. If they have a public hearing portal, add it there. If you can put a newsletter together, send it there. Get permission from people before you name them or talk about their news. If they don't want to share like that, don't. Invite them to talk to a representative. Invite them to be visited by an agent of a representative to get the story if they don't want to put it down and write their name on it. In addition to the stories, it's a good idea to start collecting them, okay? So have a collection of them. Let me tell you what I'm doing in this regard, because I think that this sounds folksy and kind of positive, but at the same time, I think a lot of people would hear this and say, yeah, we're not gonna walk around and ask my neighbors for their stories about Medicaid. I get it. But let me tell you what I'm doing that is in that vein. Okay, so this is about the trade wars and the supply chain uncertainty, which I find to be enormously risky. So one of the things I'm doing, and I live in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is not a very big community, but it is very populated. I'm going on our major thoroughfares, of which by my count, there are 4. And I'm talking with every business on them to ask, with a worksheet, how have they experienced either pricing changes related to supply chain issues or tariff issues, availability issues, so some products were not available anymore, delays, or other forms of uncertainty, and how is that impact being felt by their business? So I'm talking about that with all of them. I have an electronic form for it. I have paper forms for it. I'm doing this on the ground so that they can see they're talking to a person. I can show them a video and say, yeah, that's me. I do that. That's what it looks like to build a bank of stories and evidence. And I'm doing it for supply chain, but there's other areas that you might have more of a pressing concern or more interest or more expertise or more history. And so if you can find one of those, it's a good idea to make that part of your mission, maybe between now and the end of August, because August is a good time for activism. It's usually not when the Congress is doing a ton of work. Like, they're generally kind of out of session. People are finishing vacations. It's often not where the big political stuff happens. Now, Trump's weird, who knows? But during August, if you can put one day a week, spend maybe an hour or two, figure out how do you start reaching out, getting a sense of your community's stories that would be helpful to your legislator. Try to show up for a hearing. Find the calendar for your legislators, especially ones looking at issues you care about, and go. Show support for them. Be there as a concerned citizen. Again, scale, presence, pressure. You're adding to that. Track the effects of the policies that you care about over time, especially if you're working on them. Okay, now I care about I care about trade wars. I care about supply chain a lot. They're not my biggest issues, but I do care about them. So I'm making time to go examine them, but I'm also having to keep on listening about what's going on with the tariffs. They change constantly. I need to make sure that while I'm doing this, something doesn't change fundamentally. That means now I'm missing an opportunity to ask a better question. The third of the major strategic tool set was actually legislation. So legislators, unsurprisingly, engage in legislation. Sometimes, rumor has it, at the federal Congress level, you would be forgiven for thinking that maybe they don't do that anymore because they pass extraordinarily few bills. When you've got legislators out there trying to do that good work, you can help by organizing petitions and endorsement letters, awareness campaigns. Awareness campaigns do, in my opinion, the heavy lifting. They're the ones that explain to the audience that, by the way, an issue matters. You want to be creating the awareness campaign that casts it in the right light. The awareness campaign is often where you start somebody on the right pitch. So I would strongly suggest talk to your neighbors and organize petitions when you're talking about something you think the public doesn't have a strong awareness yet. Publicly celebrate bills that align with your community goals. So I said earlier, public celebration has a very powerful political value to it. And now we're talking about celebrating bills. We should celebrate bills. We should celebrate laws when they align with the community. We should celebrate a fight against a bill that's not going to get through because your legislator cares about the community the way that aligns with the community's values. Celebrate these things. Give the power of positive press to these people that are fighting that fight. Finally, build relationships with staffers. There are areas, and in the past I would have said, just go meet the staffers. There are areas where you can still do that and it makes sense. But often now they manage sites. The information is too large. You're not going to get what you need by just knowing them and getting gossip. You're going to need access to a newsletter or a mailing list or a site that's tracking the priorities and the updates to other initiatives. You want something like that. If you do this at the federal level, you can often find on the web pages of senators and representatives that they do track everything they're working on, current concerns, testimonials, what's going on in their communities. They make it very visible so that you can engage with them where the need is instead of trying to go through everything and make sure it's all there. Now you can see they documented it. We want you to do the same thing. Document your community's needs, document their successes, document their stories, give that evidence to your legislator to use. Okay, so the final area of strategic tool setting in the white paper between the National Women's Law Center and StateFutures.org is one looking at litigation. And before I dive into litigation, I do want to remind you, because of a previous video I did, that this has come up before. Okay, so I also talked about the tools by which citizens engage the federal government. And in comparison, these have different skills and tools in a way. But the tools that citizens generally use to do it would have been awareness campaigns, so petitions and endorsement letters and such. Awareness campaigns was the first one, and in my opinion, the most impactful. Protests and assemblies, and then notice and comment periods. That doesn't really exist in this list in the same way because very few states are doing notice and comment at the same way they do at the federal level, but it generally does happen. So technically notice and comment is also out there. The staffers might be able to help you connect with how you find out about notice and comment periods in your state, but they take a variety of approaches. So understand that there is the avenue for notice and comment periods where the public gives advice or comment to the legislators in order to make sure that the legislation is passed in a way that's graceful for the environment. No, it's meeting the need. It's not creating more problems. It's taken account of how the public reacted to it. And then the final one for personal citizen engaging with the federal government was citizen-led litigation. And now we're talking about legislator-led litigation. Okay, these have weirdly different faces because a legislator is not there as a citizen. They're there as a representative of citizens. And as a result, the interaction with them is just different. When you do it on your own, you might be suing over a breach of the Administrative Procedures Act, over a constitutional challenge. You might be suing over fraud through a QI provision in the False Claims Act. These kinds of avenues into court as a plaintiff against somebody that is either the federal government or a contractor to the federal government in the case of FCA claims. These types of opportunities for Americans are a good way to engage and have impact at the federal level. But when we talk about state legislatures, what they really need from you is to be able to identify cases where a story becomes helpful for the legal record. So all of that gathering of community stories and community impacts I described earlier, that becomes relevant again here. You might be somebody in your community who's allowed to serve as a plaintiff. And if so, tell your legislator. That visibility, in my opinion, is not a source of insecurity. In fact, it's arguably safer. Okay, so identify cases where those stories can be valuable to the legal record in a case that your legislator is bringing. Fundraise and boost awareness. Please remember litigation is very expensive, even when it's a legislator. A legislature may have a budget for this, but if you talk to your legislator, you may find out it's not a big enough budget. They may have to settle or change their strategy because they can't afford the right strategy. Organizing public support campaigns is also very important around a legal effort, okay? So you want to have this parallel. There's a litigation happening, or maybe there's hearings and a fiery discussion between legislators, and there's public support happening around it. So the stories are aligned, the pressure seems bigger and bigger. It shows a connection between your legislator and their community, without which the opposition may feel, okay, we can negotiate with the legislator. But it's different if they know they're going to have to negotiate with the legislator who is backed up by a community that's paying attention. So make this game harder for them. An example of this would be things like the hands-off rallies at the same time as we were pushing back through lots of litigation from Trump's executive orders pushing into public programs that we had to tell them hands off, not for you, no kings. Okay, finally, my last suggestion in these four toolkits is, these four elements of the toolkit, is to provide data and affidavits so that investigative bodies and legislative task forces have access to primary data. They need something that they can use at court. That may not be an anecdote. It may need to be something more formal where somebody signed it so that it could be used as evidence at court. When you're talking with people in your community, some of them are ready to be a plaintiff. Some of them are not, and some of them are scared of that idea and would never want to participate. I would get a story from somebody who doesn't want to be a plaintiff. I would invite them to be as visible as they want to be, but I want to make sure the story got to my legislator. So I got through all of this before I wanted to talk about one final point that I think is relevant to all of the sections. These sections are the strategic communication, the investigative and oversight actions, the legislation that they produce, and litigation. These were the four primary strategic toolkit that National Women's Law Center and StateFutures.org did a great job of defining, providing examples, lots of them. Lots of Congress people doing great work. What I want to say as my last point here is that you have to, in my opinion, organize a team. You need a team. You at least need a teammate. I don't care if it's a big team, a small team, but you need somebody who knows what you're doing. And this is not because of some dark fear around you being abducted. I don't think that's very likely to happen. The percentages are very low. But what I do think is likely to happen is that you are working in a flooded zone. You are trying to get so much information, and it's potentially really bad, threatening information. It erodes you. It erodes your ability to withstand the stress, the frustration. It is more than a person should have to bear alone. But two people, add just one more person, and real quickly, I think you might be able to, outlast the burnout. If it's just you, I'm like 2 weeks, you're going to have some paralyzed moments. But if it's you and some friends, then having somebody to commiserate with, having someone to share the burden is a massive change. It's why we are more powerful together in a lot of ways. But have somebody there to talk to help alleviate the oppressive nature of what feels like a difficult fight that is so inhumane. And also in that same regard, I talked momentarily about this idea of you had to keep up with the legislation. Share that duty. Somebody should be the one who's sensitive and monitoring all the things that you have to care about so that you're updating, because we live in a time of very fast updates. If I'm trying to get stories about the supply chain, I've got to know what's going on with the supply chain. Now, I'm energized about the supply chain. I feel pretty resilient in looking at that. Plus, I've already had my moments of being paralyzed by demoralized depression and I guess just the shock and stun of watching a president be so abjectly corrupt and surrounded by the same. I've already had that moment a few times. I think I'm doing better, and I'm generally one of the people that you can rely on to have an optimism for the future. I have my moments, but I'm going to be that guy. And if I have to be that guy for you, then I would suggest let's find a way. We can build community, and that's an important element here. But if you don't have somebody to back you up on this, someone to talk to, can you please say so in the comments? I would suggest consider joining the Patreon. I'll create a tier just for this. You can support your legislators, you can support their strategic initiatives, and you should do this with a small team at least, so that there is somebody to help you stay on your feet. Well, I hope this has been informative. I hope it's been a little, I hope it's inspired some enthusiasm. This is a great time, in my opinion, to start connecting with your legislator. You can make some powerful friends, can make a connection to somebody who might truly just humble you with the amount of work and heavy lifting they're capable of doing on behalf of your community. So let's get out there. We engage safely, we keep our wits about us, and let's bring a friend. We're walking each other home.